Middag allemaal.
Hi Rian, how are you?
Fine, thanks. And yourself? Mike?
Right.
Okay.
So, I'm very happy to see that we have most of our speakers. I'm still waiting for Malcolm to join us. Malcolm still hasn't logged on, but we are online. So everybody is awaiting us with bated breath. Rian, won't you tilt your camera? That's good. Comfortable with that? Okay. Do you have, you don't have any slides? It's just going to be a straight introduction.
Great introduction and welcome and what's that? Compliance. All good.
Perfect. All good. Okay, so we already have delegates in the studio, so I'm going to ask you both to switch your cameras off and to mute. And as soon as I start the webinar, then I'll bring you up when I need you, or I'll request that you come up when I need you, okay?
Certainly. Thanks a lot for your guidance.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Zane. Perfect. Debbie. All good, Debbie. Your camera's looking good. You can switch it off and you can mute yourself in the meantime. Thanks. Hi, Jody. Well, hello everybody and welcome to our webinar with Food Focus. It's great to have you with us and I'm so delighted that you've chosen to spend your Thursday afternoon in our company. We have 5 minutes before the webinar starts officially, so that allows you to do some very important activities. First of all, get a cup of coffee. If you're already onto wine, that's good. Then maybe you could top up if you're working in your home office. If you need to go for an all-important body break, now would be a good time to do that so that you don't miss out on any of the important information that we're going to be having a little later. And why don't you sit back, relax, and prepare to be inspired. We're really looking forward to today's presentation with the SASDT. And as I said, I'm looking forward to being inspired. So hang with us. We're waiting for everyone to come into the studio. We're expecting a bumper session today. So we just want to give everyone a couple of minutes to settle themselves before we start the video or the webinar officially. So thanks for being with us. Hi everyone, this is Linda from Food Focus, and thank you so much for joining us today. We've got 2 minutes before we start the webinar, so make yourselves comfortable. We're just waiting for everyone to settle in and come into the studio so that they don't miss any important information. We'll be with you shortly. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Linda Jackson from Food Focus, and we are delighted that you chose to be with us, as well as the South African Society for Dairy Technology, on this Thursday afternoon. I mean, what better could you do other than to be in our company and to be inspired by a very, very interesting presentation and looking at purpose in a time of turmoil. I think we all need this, given what's going on in the country at the moment, and this pandemic that just doesn't seem to want to go away. So let's get going, shall we? I think that's why you're here. And so I'm going to turn off my camera and I'm going to just take you through a couple of housekeeping issues before we get stuck into the real thing. Thank you so much for being with us today. First of all, you should be hearing me by now, and you should see that we have started today's presentation. The audio is coming through your speakers, so please do make sure that you have them on and that you have them unmuted, because otherwise you won't be able to hear us. Also, could you make sure that you're comfortable with the size of the presentation by clicking on your maximize window, because then you can make us as big or as small as you would like us to be in relation to today's presentation. I would make us small so you can focus on the information. The very, very important part of your menu, which you need to understand, or your dashboard, is your question box. So if you're coming in on your desktop, your menu will look a little bit like this bottom one, where you'll see the question option. Please won't you click on that in order to send us a question. And then if you're coming in on your mobile, you'll see that it has a little question mark, and the same thing, it'll allow you to give a question through to the presenter. Please don't use the chat bar for questions, because I might not see them, and I would very much like to be able to pass your question on to Dr. Human-Van Eck at the end of her presentation. If you're anything like me, write them down as soon as you remember them, because if you don't, they're gone, and we would hate for you to miss out on the opportunity that you have at the end. Today, we are delighted to be partnering with the South African Society for Dairy Technology. And this is the first of our webinars which we have lined up with them. And it's so great to be partnering with them in this initiative. So thank you so much to them for choosing Food Focus as their webinar hosts. And thank you very much for the opportunity of being part of your event today. We're delighted to be in your company. today's information is really, really interesting. We've been chatting about the new normal for a long time now. It's over a year that we've been in this very interesting state that none of us have ever been in before. And I'm sure that, like you and like me, we've had some very, very deep thoughts about this process. It's shaken our worlds. And so we're really, really delighted that today we can be chatting about purpose in a time of turmoil. And so we're really looking forward to that. And so without further ado, I would like to ask Rian to join me. Rian, won't you come online, please? Because as the official hosts of today's webinar, we would love for you to introduce today's topic, as well as to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Human-Van Eck. Over to you, Rian.
Thanks, Linda, and everybody. Heartily welcome from the SASDT National Office to this meeting today, as it's hosted by the Western Cape Division. So on behalf of our President, Mike Legrandsie, we'd like to welcome you in participating in this event, and all other industry players, manufacturers, ingredient suppliers, where possible retailers, tertiary institutions. I've seen them on the invitation list accepting the invitation, and we also hope to have a few farmers online. Just note, by participation in this event, that you acknowledge to adhere to the Competition Compliance Act and not engage in any anti-competitive behavior or discussion of any product or price. Sure, enough of that. I suppose in conjunction with the POPI Act, things that's been circulating the last day or two. But now introducing Dr. Debbie Human-Van Eck. I think we must like her because it's the second time that she's participating in a webinar. No, sorry, in a talk with us. And she must also like, we like her a lot, so she must also like us a lot, because the last time we engaged, it was in the goat shed, and this time there's definitely no wine or even good cheese around us to enjoy her talk. Debbie, we're very much looking forward to your talk on the, like Linda said, the time in purpose in the time of turmoil. I'm not quite sure what that turmoil is about. I know about a few court cases going on. Somebody must be in turmoil. But other than that, Dr. Debbie Human-Van Eck is a member of the faculty at the Stellenbosch University, where she heads up the Postgraduate Diploma in Marketing and teaches marketing, communication, brand management, and consumer psychology. She's also a co-worker at the neuro-marketing research lab that has been established at Stellenbosch University, and yeah, she's also the mother of a young daughter and the wife to a sculptor. So we're looking very much forward to a talk. Debbie, over to you, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Rian. It is a privilege to join you again this afternoon in this weird circumstances, and we would have thought that by now we would be used to everything, but it every week with new rules and new proclamations and the university on our side deciding new things also, it feels like a completely new experience again. But for me, it's lovely to spend this afternoon with you. And if it's okay with you, I will switch to my PowerPoint screen, and I will rather switch off my camera. Then I know with all our bandwidth and everything, it's all good. Yes, let me do that. All right, and then if Linda or Rian, can you, okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure that you can all.
It's all good. Over to you. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you so much. So purpose is a big word nowadays, and I know Rian referred now to this idea of turmoil. So I will start the presentation by referring to turmoil, and to avoid any complexities and to make sure that it's all very understandable, I will use the word turmoil to guide us through it. But ultimately, I want to get to the idea of purpose. And some of the thoughts we share might be familiar to you, some of it might be foreign thinking, but I do think we're in a time where rethinking is quite important. So let's get started, and let's get started by speaking, as I said, about turmoil. So turmoil around us, as Rian mentioned, for different people, turmoil might mean different things at this stage. But for us, the first reference that turmoil brings to the fore is the idea of trust. I think the world that we're living in now is a world where trust has become a very interesting concept, because basically where we are in South Africa, trust is extremely low and much lower than many other parts of the world. If you link trust to the idea of consumer confidence and you look at the graph that you see in front of you, and I promise there's not going to be a whole bunch of graphs, it's just how we're starting off. But if you look at this graph, you can see that consumer confidence in South Africa is quite low. There's an interesting tool that you might be aware of called the Edelman Trust Barometer. It measures trust as a function of competence and ethics, and basically it says that we as South Africans don't trust many entities. But I wanted to share this graph with you because with this idea of a deep lack of trust, we see that there is actually entities that are trust a bit, but I'll get to that just now. Trust for me is important when we talk about turmoil and when we talk about purpose, because without trust, commitment is not possible. And without commitment, loyalty is virtually unreachable. So anybody who wants loyalty towards their brands and who wants commitment to purchases and continued purchases, for instance, trust should be a very important foundation. The good side of this lack of trust is that entities that are at this stage most trusted by South Africans is business. So I think that puts us in a good position to actually become the voice of reason and the beacon of light to many South Africans if we continue like we are continuing now. Non-profits are trusted less, media is trusted less, because the picture that they are often painting to us, and I mean, I've worked in media and it's an industry that I have a lot of respect for because we have wonderful journalists in this country. But somehow it seems that the picture we sometimes get is not a positive one, although there's a lot of positive stories around us. So it's up to business also to share the information that builds the trust with consumers. Government, let's not even speak about the different views that people at this stage have of government. So the second part of turmoil for me is about uncertainty. Nothing strange, the pandemic has brought about one of the most uncertain periods in modern history. And we all know that a lot of this uncertainty has been caused by COVID. We all know about this new normal idea. Some people have moved on. Many of the ad agencies have focused on saying, but instead of talking about a new normal, can't we rather talk about a better normal? And now it seems like everybody is a bit uncertain even about whether this better thing is possible, and we're talking about the next normal. It's an acceptance that things will never be the same again, but we're not sure will it be better or not. It's a little bit as if we're hanging in the middle at this stage. So what we do know is normal is not a word that we'll probably like to associate with the time that we are living in currently. I wanted to share this picture with you, and not for looking at the detail at all, but you'll see at the top it refers to different industries from digital adoption right through to interpersonal, and then on the sidebar you'll see it refers to permanence and temporary. So basically what this graph says is what is the expected permanence of the COVID-induced habit changes that we see within this very uncertain environment. The important takeout from the picture in front of us that we can see this new next better normal is not going to go back to where we were. So we can see that a lot of the changes that has been identified as big habit changes amongst consumers are here to stay. Sometime when the pandemic hopefully leaves us, masks will become temporary. So that's the thing that will probably disappear. On the interpersonal side, maybe this increase that we're seeing in divorces will stabilize or decrease a bit, but a lot of habit changes will remain. Our digital adoption, how we work and the hybrid situations that will follow, the cashless society that we're experiencing, but also the financial crisis that many South Africans are experiencing, the big focus on health, those things will not necessarily disappear. So indeed, there is a next normal that we have to understand, and that's what makes everything so uncertain, because nobody really has the ability to predict with certainty what it is that is lying ahead. If we talk about uncertainty, I think it's important to say what are the type of consequences we're seeing, this COVID-induced consequences. And there's a few things that's evident, things that we already know, so I don't want to expand too much on them, but we know there's an increased digital adoption. It means also that consumers are expecting more from a digital perspective, from suppliers, from retailers, from anyone that they buy from, but also anybody who's involved in the supply and value chain. There's a change in mobility patterns, so we know that people are working from different places. I'm at the university currently, some of you are at home, perhaps here and there somebody at an office, but that has changed and it has brought consequences with it. We know there's an increased awareness of our health, but also the concern for our own health and of others. There's a lot of changes in interpersonal behavior. I've referred now to, for instance, rise in divorces, but also an extensive rise in pet adoption. Pet industry is one of the only industries that keeps on thriving despite pandemics, recession, you name it. We've seen changes in purchasing behavior. People are much more focused on value, and providers or businesses who are not going to provide value in all kinds of offerings will probably be not the ones chosen by consumers. We've seen a lot of increase in local focus, so people love local, they shop local, so they expect things from local. And what's interesting also is that people postpone big decisions. They don't necessarily make big decisions. That includes purchasing decisions, except for the counter trend that we also see where revenge is becoming quite a big part of the stage of the pandemic where we are now. And when I talk about revenge, it's not in the Netflix soap series type of format, but revenge travel, revenge buying. It's like, fine pandemic, if you want to take control, I'll just buy something, or I'll just go away to the Karoo for the weekend, fine. So it's that type of revenge purchases that I'm referring to. And we also see a rise in conscious consumption. And I think many of the things that I've mentioned now is definitely not new. But I think what we have to acknowledge in this time of uncertainty is that the psyche, and let's just focus on South Africans for now, the psyche of the South African consumer has shifted. In other words, these changes that we're seeing in trends and that we're observing through data is connected to much deeper shifts that lie beyond the surface, beneath the surface. It's where we can't see it. And it's had a much more profound impact on consumers that I think we can actually comprehend now. So it's a huge shift in who people are and how they see themselves. If I can just expand a little bit on a few of these consequences that I've referred to, I think when it comes to digital adoption, and this, some people say, you know, we've had 10 years of digital progression happening in 3 months. That's the type of stats that people are throwing around. But there's a very, very much enhanced need for connection from consumers, and they expect businesses to also facilitate that connection. We also see that people are fatigued. The change in mobility patterns means that people are questioning how they live, whom they're living with, whether their life is satisfying at all. A lot of that is because there's time for reflection and introspection, but a lot of it has to do with fatigue. Again, there's a new bunch of articles being released, for instance, about mothers working from home and the impact that has had on not just whether you're coping with everything, but also on whether you are able to psychologically remain stable. So it's had a huge impact also on just how we operate in the world. In terms of the health awareness, I think what is really interesting, and we're seeing this trend, I think we're seeing it in food, but we're also seeing it in beauty and some other industries, that there's a big shift in focus from age to longevity. So it's not just about staying healthy so that you can almost age better, or so that you can age less, for instance, or that you can remain alive for longer, but it's more about being fully alive. It's about having fulfilling lives, and food, beauty products, all playing into that almost internal longevity and sustainability. And what's interesting also when it comes to conscious consumption, we all know about green and sustainable. But what's interesting for me now, it's not just about green anymore. It's also about natural, but it's about how science and nature can meet. So there's more and more research being done in different industries about how we can actually use science to make nature and what nature has to offer and what is natural work even better for us. Biological engineering and engineering that it's what is natural and making it even better, and almost giving nature to us on steroids. A lot of these things that I'm saying, I know we can also question, is it right or wrong, but this is some of the trends that we're seeing in this COVID-induced uncertainty. The R of turmoil, I want to refer to reality, because we have a new reality, but I think more important is how we deal with this reality. And from a personal perspective, resilience is a very important aspect. It's a very important trait, but we also see that business resilience is becoming more and more prominent, and with that, not just if businesses are perceived as resilient, not just whether employees view their firms as resilient, but also how supply chains can be resilient. And this issue of resilience has brought a lot of focus to how our supply chains are put together, who are the role players in that supply chain, what is the relationships between the members in that supply chain. So I took three quotes that I think is very interesting for me from a resilience perspective. The one is from somebody that might be very familiar to you, Emmanuel Faber, who was the CEO and chairman of Danone. And he says resilience comes from trading off short, mid, and long-term goals. So you can't just focus on the one, it's that shift the whole time between them. But more importantly, it's about an ecosystem of business partners. So it's realizing you, all your suppliers, your competitors, everybody who's in an industry is actually part of an ecosystem where everybody influences each other. And if you think of yourself as partners in an ecosystem, suddenly you also think differently about how you can manage and manage this ecosystem and help it to thrive. Arvind Krishna, who is the CEO of IBM, says resilience is about adaptability and it's about innovative technology. So technology that can help us to innovate, but innovate in a way that is truly meaningful also to consumers. And then Kathleen McLaughlin, who's from Walmart, and she also chairs the Walmart Foundation, puts this big thing on the table again, supply chain resilience. It's how you can bounce back from difficult situations. But it's not just about selling and making sure that you're still making money, but it's about making sure that you're putting together a sustainable and a healthy business in every part of that operation. Then if we go to the M, it's about money. Now, there's a lot of other things we could talk about. We could talk about mobility. We can talk about mobile as a proxy for digital and technology and the online lives that consumers are living. But I wanted to speak about money, because I think if we're in business in any way currently, and I'm using business broadly, whether it's about education as a business or farming as a business, the point is people don't have money. And even those who have money perhaps have less at this stage. So money for a lot of consumers is a huge crisis. Consumers are extensively financially stressed. This is South African comments that I'm taking from different articles. And we're seeing it across the board, but we also see it explicitly in the middle class. So we cannot think about South Africans only as the mom, dad, 2.4 children, the representative middle class, and say everything is okay. What we really have to realize is that people are struggling. Yes, sure, you have people who have sufficient money and everything can continue, something like the picture on the right hand of your screen. But the true reality is that we also have the left hand of the screen. In South Africa, that is our country. We have the huge divides. But I think I don't want to talk about that. What I want to say is there is a crisis because many people are simply in a position where they do not know where the next month's money will come from. So it's about day-to-day living. It's about searching for options where you can still feel I'm alive, I am at least eating, I've got something to live for, although I don't have any money. Households, so many people in a household, I mean, you would have, say, a mother and a father, and you would have a dual income family, and suddenly there's one income or there's no income. So the consequences of COVID, we know that. We know about unemployment. We know about so many industries in our country that is struggling, but we have to realize the depth of the impact on actual consumers that has to walk into a store and, for instance, buy a bread or a yogurt, for instance. The situation is dire. What's interesting to me is the research is South Africa is not a middle-class society with a small working class anymore. That is how we used to describe ourselves. It's a working-class society with a small middle class. I found this comment very interesting. Households below the poverty line have increased dramatically, while an estimated 34% of middle-class families are estimated to fall into vulnerability, and some researchers say that's happened, that 34% of people have fallen away from the middle class, and our middle class has become really small because so many people are now in a situation where they are extremely vulnerable and desperate to sustain themselves and their families. So this is a very dire situation. You might ask to me, but are there still opportunities out there? And yes, definitely, that's where my light bulb comes from. But what I do know and what I do believe is, if it's not even about evolving as business, it's not about existing as business. We need extreme creativity in how we go about, and we need a revolution in terms of our business thinking if we really want to success in this time that is COVID and beyond. So we'll get back to that in a little bit. When it comes to the I of turmoil, there's a lot of words that I would like to use. There's intelligence. We all know there are multiple intelligences that people refer to nowadays, and there's, I think, about 8 or 9 acknowledged intelligences, including interpersonal, emotional intelligence, there's biological or ecological intelligence, there's spatial intelligence. So intelligence is important, and we acknowledge that we can describe different people, different scenarios in terms of different levels of intelligence. We can talk about insight, saying, well, it's not just about the big data that everybody's talking about, it's about how you look at that data and what are the insights that you can draw from it. We can certainly talk about innovation, which is absolutely critical in the time that we're living in now. I thought there's some interesting examples that I could share from with you that I find personally very interesting, because it shows also how we can think about innovation. I looked at an article of top 10 food supplier or food producers across the world, and some of the great things that they were doing in terms of innovation. And one of the comments was interesting to me. We are moving beyond price, taste and convenience to value, health and wellness, social impact and experience. So how we're thinking about innovation and what represents innovation is changing. Thought this was an interesting example. And look, I'm definitely not a dairy expert, and I don't know all the jargon, but I do find this interesting from a business perspective. Maybe you know Chobani yogurt, which is a Greek yogurt product, and they have been awarded not just because of the very great things they're doing, but because of the great things as impact on their bottom line and how they're overtaking traditional competitors. But long story, Chobani, for instance, have completely embraced the digital consumer and understanding the habit of the digital consumer. And their CEO says it's about creating a really close connection with consumers, and digital habits and digital data that we have can help you do that because you understand them better. And then it's about telling the story of food, and digital allows you to reach people where they are. So it's not expecting people to go to you, but it's going to people where they are, but also where they are in their minds. One of the people from Shubhani made this comment, we make yogurt, but we're really a wellness company. It's about a nutritional wellness, community and employee wellness, and environmental wellness. We're a food-focused wellness company that uses food as a force for good. So I think what I'm also getting to, how we define ourselves now is a very important foundation for the future, and I think there's perhaps some evolution that can happen in many different businesses in South Africa. There's an interesting example also for me, Halo Top, which is an ice cream brand, but it's specifically a low-calorie ice cream brand. And they say connection with consumers. We have embraced the idea of a guilt-free pint of ice cream. That's our focus, they say. And the only reason why we're getting it right is because we've got amazing fans. So what they're doing again is they're focusing on the consumer and understanding really what it is that the consumer wants and needs. And they got to this point of low-calorie ice cream after making all kinds of sugarless and sugar-free and all kinds of errors. And then they came to this point. But they listened to what their consumers were saying. You can see throughout what I'm saying, I'm trying to build this argument for a different type of understanding and listening to your consumer. And I know this is a brand that you will know much more about than myself, for instance, A2 Milk, where they said that it's people who cannot use milk. I'm now quoting from this article. It's often because of the proteins in milk, and then they decided to separate this A2 protein, if I'm correct, and then to create this product. So they're almost creating a stepping stone for people to have a dairy-ish alternative instead of going directly to a non-dairy alternative. I know I'm making this very informal language and some of you are cringing because I'm not using the correct jargon. But the point I'm trying to make is they say it's about discovery of a core benefit that currently exists within the dairy structure. So they re-looked at their product, they re-looked at the data that they have, and they said, how can the biology and the structure of this product actually help us to create something different? So it was also thinking differently about consumer needs and how science can facilitate that. So I'm just trying to say that innovation can happen in many different places. So the I in turmoil can stand for many different things. But for me, I think the key is about not just innovation. It's about more than that. It's about dreaming. You might know about this Natura milk that was created by Jeff Hastings, which is a fresh refrigerated milk, but it's safe for consumption for 60 days. And they also say it's about imagination and also being really interested in consumers. So I'm saying it's beyond innovation that's needed for us in this era that we're living in. It's about imagining a different reality. And the only way that that is really possible is by harnessing and nurturing, I think, an extreme curiosity for change, for thinking differently, and for consumers, really caring about consumers. And that brings me to the final letter in turmoil, which is love. And I'm not going to venture into the fuzzy concept of love. I know the marketers out there are very much familiar with the idea of brand love and love marks. That's been around for years. It's been put on the table by Kevin Roberts from Saatchi & Saatchi. So from an advertising perspective, there's this notion that focus on your true fans who are in love with you, and they will become your advocates and they will spread the word about your brand. But what I want to say is there's many different types of love that we know. So if you think love, different people will have different views, and that's great. But what's important now, I think, is as business, as marketers, as consumer specialists, we have to start thinking about consumers as our mothers or consumers as our children. So the level of empathy that is expected now for your consumer is a much deeper and more profound level that I think was ever expected. And yes, it is about understanding that consumers are experiencing an extremely difficult time, but it's also about understanding that there is so many insights that we can gain if we are truly interested and if we truly care, if you truly put yourself in the shoes of the consumer. So I think that brings me to the whole idea of purpose, because we as business or entities that operate within a certain industry, and actually all businesses, have to ask ourselves, what is our purpose? And it sounds, I mean, it's a word that's not unfamiliar. We know people talk about purpose, but it actually represents a complete rethink of the way that the world operates. So many of us are familiar with this whole woke trend. You know, it's about waking up to what's going on in society and about social injustices. And we've seen many trends across the world that has tapped into the woke trend. I very much agree with the CEO of Unilever that a few years ago at the Cannes Advertising Festival said, we have to be very careful for woke washing. It's brands running purpose-driven campaigns, but failing to take real action. So it's talking the talk, but there's no walk behind it. He says that if we don't understand purpose correctly, and it's just about woke, then our wokeness will turn into woke washing, and that will decrease trust even further. He referred specifically to advertising. It threatens to further destroy trust in our industry when it's already in short supply. But what I've realized is it's not just about advertising, it's across business. It's not just about being woke, it's about walking the walk and talking the talk. Now, what is purpose? Harvard Business Review makes it very clear. Your purpose is not a vision, a mission, or values. So those are all important. You know, what's your dream? What do you want to achieve in a shorter or medium term? What is it that you believe in, your principles that you stand for? But that's not what your purpose is. So what is it then? James Dean said, I think the prime reason for existence, for living in this world, is discovery. Now that was his purpose. His purpose was discovery. But if I can really simplify it, our purpose is our reason for existence. So it is why you are on this earth. So it is on an individual and personal level, it's important, but it's equally important, I think, also on a business level. So why does your business exist here on earth? What is it here to do? There's a wonderful book that was written by Pepe Marais. It's called Growing Greatness. And Pepe Marais is a very, very interesting man who's got a diverse experience, specifically in the advertising industry. But this book's not just about advertising. But Pepe started the renowned advertising company called Joe Public, who is, I mean, they're multi-awarded every year. They produce great work. But for them, purpose is an extremely important thing, and he's become like this advocate for true purpose in the world of business. And he says, when it is about purpose, your challenge is to find your reason for existence on a very authentic and a fundamental level. So it's not just what you do on earth, it is why you exist. As an example, after a lot of thinking and reflection, he said, but his purpose in life and for his business, and he believes in the integration between the two, is growth. So for him, it's all about growth. And he says he thinks if you can distill purpose into one word that really, really makes sense to you and that really summarizes your reason for existence, it brings clarity. And because there's clarity, it's easier to almost build on that thought and to start operating from that purpose. So it's a very interesting book to read. So Pepe and the Joe Public has, for instance, now started the School for Growth, and they've implemented this idea of growth throughout their business in various ways. And that's also what they try and achieve for their clients. So it is an example, I think, where purpose is about reflecting about your reason for existence, reaching complete clarity, but then making sure that you obsessively dedicate yourself also to living that purpose. So many people have written, or well, wish we've written. I've read this book probably by Simon Sinek, Start With Why. And Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. And this ties in with purpose. But Simon Sinek, who is a noteworthy thinker in the area of business, he focuses extensively on the why. And that really, really is important. But in my view, purpose is about more than that. It is actually about identity. It is about who you are at your core. So for a business, it's not just about why you're doing things, but it's about deeper than that. It's about where nobody can see who you are, there in the depths of depths, what is at your core. So the idea of purpose renews the emphasis on identity. And identity is a word that is very strong within the brand world as well. So if we talk about brands, brand identity is very important. But I think we are there now where we realize that identity is a core element of purpose. It's a core foundation of purpose, and discovering who you are is critical for you to know what is your reason for existence. I am quite fond of the B Corp movement, and again, I'm sure some of you know more about this movement than I do, but the B Corp movement allows businesses to adhere to certain principles and then to become registered as a B Corp, and then also to use the B Corp symbol on their products and services, but also then they have to stick to what they commit to. And this B Corp movement is all about business as a force for good, a global economy that uses business as a force for good. I want to refer to some of the principles at the bottom of the screen, just so that you can hear the language that we also hear in this B Corp declaration. It's a declaration of interdependence. So like Emmanuel Faber from Danone, or that used to be with Danone, like he said, it's about an ecosystem. And we believe that we must be the change we seek in the world, Gandhi. That all business ought to be conducted as if people and place mattered, as if we cared, that empathy again. That through their products, practices, and profits, business should aspire to do no harm and benefit all. We believe to do so requires that we act with the understanding that we are each dependent upon another and thus responsible for each other and future generations. Think of everybody around you as if they're your mother or your child. That deep, deep care and responsibility. What is interesting for me is some of the brands that are viewed as leaders in the purpose arena. Patagonia, for instance, is a brand that might come to mind very quickly when we talk about purpose, because Patagonia and how they started and how they operate, it's an outdoor brand, but they're more than that. Being a purposeful brand is at their core. Another example is Dove, for instance. Now, Dove wasn't always a business like that. It wasn't always for them about purpose. It was about saying to consumers, yeah, we've got a bar of soap. It's a little bit different. That's why we don't make it quite square like the other soaps. We make it a little bit rounder so you can see it's different, and it's got moisturizer in it already. That was Dove. It's a moisturizing soap. And then suddenly there was a change happening. Dove, for instance, did a research project that was the foundation of the real beauty movement, where and it was quite a large research project, and they realized that less than 5% of the women that participated in the study viewed themselves as beautiful. I think it was like 2 or 3%. So a very, very small portion of women view themselves as beautiful. And for them, that was shocking. They wanted to discover, but why? And that realization brought a new way of thinking, actually, in the Dove stable, and it started the Real Beauty campaign. So it started out as a campaign, and now it's a movement, it's a foundation, and it's become a purpose-driven brand. And Not all businesses always get it right every time. So even the examples of brands that I mentioned might get it wrong sometimes. We're not perfect. But I think if we have that ecosystem thinking, it's not about catching out the errors, but it's about keeping each other accountable. Another brand that is very well known over long periods of time for being purpose-driven is Body Shop. And their newest proclamations is all about enrich, not exploit. It's in your hands. So it draws people into this process of not harming the environment, not harming people. So that's another example. And even Starbucks has made a bit of a turnaround. And you can listen to how they describe their purpose: to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. They sell coffee and things that go with coffee, but that's not how they think of themselves. It's about inspiring and nurturing the human spirit. So a big part of identity is not describing your business in functional terms. It's not about what you produce. It's not about what you sell. It is about your purpose. So it's about how you think about your reason for existence. Why are you on this earth? And they say one of the reasons why Starbucks is showing the shift and why it is working in many instances for them is because of the CEO, who's now very rich, but they call it the famous rags to riches story, because he doesn't come from a very rich background. So he had to work hard to get where he is now. I mean, we all know that type of story. But I think there is something to say about truly understanding consumers, normal people who are walking the face of this earth and who wants to just have a good life. So another example, and I think one of my favorites, is Ben & Jerry's. Now, Ben & Jerry's is, I mean, it's a brand that is well known in many countries, and they sell wonderful ice cream. But what was interesting with Ben & Jerry's, and what made me particularly take notice of them again, is when the Black Lives Matter movement hit the ground, can we call it that? When it sparked, Ben & Jerry's was one of the first brands to respond. And they immediately put out a statement, and this statement clarified how they think, what they think. They took a stance. And the only reason why they could take such a quick stance was because of who they are. They were already very clear about who they are, what is their reason for existence, what they stand for, before a movement requested a response from them. I think what's interesting also is one of the reasons why they have such clear policies about how they think about the world and who they are as a brand and what they stand for is because they don't have, for instance, a CSI manager, because a lot of these type of issues is sometimes, you know, pushed into the CSI corner. There, deal with purpose stuff there in the social responsibility corner, but they've made purpose a core part of their business operations, and the person who helps them to lead this the movement is an activist. So the person that they appointed as part of their social involvement and social responsibility team has a core place in the management team, and he doesn't come from a social investment perspective. He comes from an activist perspective. So he worked in the non-profit industry, and he was responsible for writing policy and clarifying what you think and making sure that what you stand for and what you say to people is true and it's authentic, and you really are willing to stand by it despite what other people say. Because see, that's the thing about purpose. Sometimes what your reason for existence is, other people might not agree with it, but that's okay if you are at least authentically and fundamentally sure that that is what you stand for. What is interesting for me, though, is that it's not an easy process. We are talking about a complete business revolution in how we think. So Danone, for instance, was celebrated a few years ago for becoming a purpose-driven company and for becoming B Corp certified. It was quite a big thing, and it was because of the CEO, Emmanuel Faber, who was very progressive in terms of making sure that it's not just about shareholders, it's also about stakeholders, not treating consumers badly, not treating the planet badly. So he was very, very vocal and very strongly believed in the integration of business with society. But the sad thing is that his tenure came to a very, very quick end. So this article underlines it, the fall from favor of Danon's purpose-driven chief. And basically what happened is two very small shareholders complained that they are not getting what they should from Danon because the CEO is focusing too much on purpose and too much on the planet, and he should be focusing a bit more on money. And they were able to actually make sure that Danon voted against him as the next CEO. So it's not an easy process to adopt and to entrench yourself in a life of purpose, but it is something that I think is highly rewarding, and that is now the thing that first movers are doing because they truly understand the value of it. But that will be inevitable within the next few years for all businesses to rethink why you are on this earth, and specifically in an era where we know that business is trusted more than governments, media, or non-profits. I think there's a very big opportunity to reconnect and differently with consumers, but also to satisfy needs in a different way that will eventually, over the longer term, benefit both business and consumer. Laurie Hell, in their projections for 2030, talks about the new panorama of humanity, and they say that's what we're going to have to shift towards, is define for your business what the new panorama of humanity means for you. So it means, how do you look at society, how do you look at people, and who are you in relationship with those people? I hope for many of you this sounds like an enticing and creative period that is coming, although not just easy, and it might be somewhat challenging. Thank you very much for listening to me. That's it from my side.
Wow, that was really, really interesting. And I have to say, very, very challenging in relation to just, you know, our general business practices. Even though we're a small little business, I think there are lots and lots of lessons that we can learn from that, and a very, very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Van Eck. That was very, very interesting. It's over to you. So now at this point, we would very much like for you to ask away at your questions, because I think at the end of the day, it's really getting inside this presentation and really understanding some of the practicalities of it, perhaps, which can be very, very useful within your business operations. So over to you, everybody out there. Please, won't you pop your questions into the question bar? You're welcome to send me comments as well, so that I can pass those on to Dr. Debbie, so that she knows how you experienced her presentation and how we can, you know, some more information that you would like to know from her. So come on, I'm going to give you a minute or so to pop in all your questions before I start with mine, because I've got a long list and a long list of comments that I would like to make with regards to your presentation. So come on, everybody, take the time to pop those questions in right now, so that we can ensure that you can get your answers. While we're waiting, Dr. Debbie, now I know why I bought that very expensive pair of shoes called Revenge Purchase, Revenge on COVID. Yeah, at least I can now justify this expenditure to my husband. I have a name and I can say, but Dr. Debbie said that it was okay. So there we go. I really thought that was interesting, you know, just in terms of consumers trying to get back, I suppose, at the frustration that we're feeling at the moment, and doing this by means of revenge purchases. I really also thought that what was so interesting was was the word that you said about, or when you mentioned inspiring our customers, you know, that it's not just what we sell, but our purpose as an organization. And I think, you know, some of the brands that you mentioned, it's so interesting when you look at them now. It's, of course, you can see the message is very, very clear. You know, when you look at their messaging, and when you look at their adverts, their packaging, like you showed with Ben & Jerry, you can immediately make that connection. So sometimes it's a little subtle, but when you highlight it, it's really, really interesting to you know, to see. So thank you for that. I think if we have the conversation with ourselves with regards to our reason for existence, yeah, I think this would be an interesting conversation around many boardroom tables. I'm just thinking of some of the companies that I've worked with, you know, in the past. Yeah, I'd like to see you facilitate those discussions, because, you know, I think sometimes you can have hardened businessmen who are so interested in the bottom line that they don't necessarily think about these things. Is that your experience?
Yeah. I think what's happened, look, maybe I'm a idealist, but I don't think any business wants to be bad ever.
No.
I just think that how the world evolves in this very capitalistic world that we're living in, that the bottom line is, of course, important. It retains jobs, it keeps the company going. So it is critical, but I think we're realizing now that how we think about the world that we're operating is going to have a profound effect on our ability to keep on operating. And what COVID has done is it has excelled the expectations of the people that's supposed to buy our products, for instance. But for me, what is really, really interesting about, I think two things about this, the purpose thing is, the one thing is we can see as, you know, consumers or business people. I mean, we're not studying different businesses the whole time necessarily, but we can see examples of how things are, you know, showing up in the marketplace. But when those are just merely little signals of what's going on in complete strategic rethinking. So this purpose thing is not something that happens within CSI. It's not a marketing thing, because then it just becomes a campaign. It is really about a very thorough rethinking from the highest possible strategic level. So that's important. And for me, what is interesting, and it also shows that people are starting to understand the thinking around purpose, is also how many people are referring to supply chains and rethinking every step of the supply chain, the purpose of everything in there, and who you liaise with, who you do business with, who you purchase from. So there's a quite a profound way of thinking about all of this, also from a supply chain perspective. So it's not just silly examples of nice new yogurt, you know, it's not just that.
No, absolutely. You know, one of the things that I am very interested in is the topic of food safety culture. I always look at food from the perspective of how safe is it for the consumer, and it's so interesting about, you know, the fact that it's not about having a CSI manager, but you know, some of the companies that you mentioned, but it's actually a part of core operations. And I think when you're having these kinds of discussions, it is about changing the culture of the organization, and that does require a fundamental shift. It doesn't need this sort of support manager on the side who's trying their best to make us change our mind. It's actually got to come from the leadership team. It's got to come from the, you know, so the core, as you said, of the organization. Very interesting, you know, comments about Danone, because, you know, I mean, we've got this whole thinking regarding people, planet, profit, you know, triple bottom line reporting, and the need to have the need to almost not go back to some of the issues that we saw in 2008, you know, and even before that, where we have these companies that are just chasing profit and doing it in very unscrupulous ways. So it's quite interesting to see that maybe not everyone's in favor of that. You know, it's there's still people out there that want to make money at all costs, but like you said, you know, hopefully that will change over time.
And in a way, it's also this whole thing about purpose and identity also says, but we have to allow everybody to be what they are. but then just be it truthfully and openly. If you're just about money, then at least, you know, be open about it. Then everybody knows, and then people who like that, because there are people like that, will agree with you. There's the famous example of Abercrombie and Fitch and their CEO, who was scrutinized extensively. It's not their current CEO, it's one or two back, but he was a very, very interesting figure. But he basically said, we don't want fat people buying our clothes, and we don't want ugly people buying our clothes. So there was a whole drama around that. And we've had discussions about that. But what we said in the end is, you know, at least he was honest about it. So if you judge, then it's fine. Don't support them. And there are people who love that thoughts and they'll go for it. But at least he was honest about it in a time where it wasn't appreciated, I think. And I often think maybe now, a few years later, it would be different. But yes, I do think this is now not just about being an innovative business. This is what's going to be expected from by consumers. So especially with the growing millennial generation that's just becoming more powerful, it's a very, very different shopping generation. So
now, just one last comment before I give you all your compliments that are coming in. They're just like coming in from everybody. One last question. You know, you mentioned the millennial and what have you, but you also mentioned at the beginning of your conversation how we have this working class and the shrinking middle class. Do you really think that these, you know, the things that you've mentioned and what have you, do you really think that this reflects the majority of consumers in South Africa, which are the working class, or is this, you know, some of these aspects reserved for the more sophisticated audience, maybe the middle class?
I think the point is people are struggling. And I think if as a business you don't acknowledge it now, or understand or show deep empathy for it, then you're actually disrespecting the consumer and their reality. So I think even in the short term, if businesses have to do something that helps the consumer, people are really, really struggling to make ends meet, and it's making people desperate. It's having a very bad impact on our whole psychology as a country. And I think businesses who have a huge opportunity of building that trust with consumers, if they can show that they really are trying to understand where consumers are coming from, and if they're trying to do something to help the consumer. And it can be very simple. I mean, we know from experience over years that even something like a value price bundle is sometimes perceived by consumers as a gift, because suddenly I can actually buy a little bit more than I would have been able to do. So that's a very, very small and silly short-term example. It's a little campaign tactic, but the thing is, it shows to consumers you're trying to put yourselves in their shoes, and consumers are struggling. I mean, we're living in a country where I know averages are very dangerous, but for a very huge, like the average South African spends more than 70% of their monthly salary on paying back debt of some form. It is we are in crisis.
Absolutely.
And it seems like business is basically the only entity that is, you know, allowed to be open, because not even the church can become a go-to for people. Business has a very big opportunity now. But it's about understanding the consumer and having respect for their situation, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Debbie, I've got a question here from Rian, so maybe he the next philosophy after all companies are working for a purpose. So Rian, I'm not sure if I'm fully understanding the question, but in terms of, you know, if I'm understanding his question, he's saying, well, if we're already a purpose-driven organization, should we be looking at the next step, or is, you know, do you think right now, based on where we are, that that's the right sort of strategy and philosophy to have for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think purpose is key now, but it's about making sure that it is literally entering into all facets of your business. And I think then it's about grabbing the opportunities that's coming from the trends that we see in front of us, in a way that aligns with your purpose, but that also provides new business opportunities.
Absolutely.
So
and as you
the things remain. Sorry, I interrupted. But the things remain. You know, the power of big data. In food, for instance, how you can look at composition, even simple products, and how that can be a profound different something if you really listen to the consumers. The Greek yogurt that we spoke about, I mean, they had a very interesting, very sweet, but they want a subtler taste, and they've got this highly a wonderful range now that they call hint of. So they just slightly infuse the yogurt, but they had to deconstruct the whole product, listen to consumers, make one or two mistakes, take the chance, and now it's working great. So, and I think this longevity thing is going to be the shift towards longevity, and how we see that filtering into all parts of our lives. And I think what's also interesting, you referred to small business earlier, is that I think we have to have our eyes open for the first mover small businesses. Because for small firms, it is often easier to move quicker and to come up with profound ideas, but they cannot necessarily scale it. But instead of stealing those ideas, think about partnerships and relationships, and how that the creativity that comes from a smaller business can actually infuse also the things that we do.
Absolutely, collaboration. So Terence says thank you so much, and Nosipo says thank you so much, very insightful, really enjoyed it. Fantastic talk, lots of insights. Christine says thank you very much for a fantastic presentation, and she definitely sparked a different way of thinking and planning going forward. So now thank you so much. I think on behalf of the SASDT, thank you so much, but instead of me saying it, they're going to say it. And so I would like to now ask Mike and Malcolm to join me, please, to just say a few words on behalf of your hosts. So let's bring them online. Thanks. Debbie, please don't go anywhere.
Great, can you hear me?
Mike, we can hear you loud and clear. I just want to make sure that we've got Malcolm on board as well. Malcolm, are you there? For some reason, your camera's not showing us your face, but I can see that you are with us. So would you like to go ahead and chat anyway? Mike, I'm going to hand over to you first, and then I'm sure you're going to hand over to Malcolm after that.
Yes, I'll do so. Dr. Debbie, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. I'm just quickly summarize from what you've got there. The purpose of identity is for us to be a force of good and to think of our customers or consumers as our mothers or children. And I really like that kind of idea, that concept, that we drive that kind of caring approach in future. And thanks for enlightening us. It is real great. It is a second talk that you've given, and I think we are as inspired by this one than with the previous one. And I think you put in more effort. We are, you know, last time we had nice wine and cheese to also inspire us, and now there's no wine and cheese, but we are even more inspired. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mike.
Just thinking back of the Dairy Society, you know, we started in the 1950s, and with a purpose to promote technical information and networking. And we also went through a number of challenging circumstances, times of turmoil, where we had to adapt. And I always like to say that the first big challenge that we got was Google, because suddenly technical information was much more freely available, and we had to adapt to that. And we adapted by, for instance, bringing more softer skill information to people, typically like this presentation that you've done today, because it is not so much what we do technically, but what we do as a whole business. And then came our second big challenge at the turn of the century, and that was where everybody had to comply with the demands of the Competition Act. And the second purpose of the society was challenged, and that's to second purpose was of building good networks. And again, there we had to adapt to that and make certain plans so that we could continue with adapting to the changes. But I think those changes were particularly small ones, and they helped to prepare us a little bit for this massive turmoil that literally impacted the whole world. And there's not a country in this world that hasn't been impacted, coming COVID. And again, I think if we as the South African Society of Dairy Technologists just take this, what you have presented to us, and we apply that to our members and how we reach out into the dairy industry, we will really continue to find our purpose. We will continue to add benefit to the dairy industry and to the bigger industry in South Africa as a whole. So I really thank you for challenging us in that point. From my personal point of view, I've got a lot of confidence in the national management team and the divisional management teams, and they've got the enthusiasm to drive this through this turmoil, and the contact number to reach out to you again in the future. So once again, thank you very much. Also for our two sponsors, I would like to say thank you, Food Focus. Linda, thank you for your team and your sponsorship. And Dairy Standards Agency, Jonty Berger, thank you so much for your sponsorship. We really appreciate that. And then just on a personal note, for all our members, personally, I received a wonderful opportunity to work on a couple of projects in the Indian dairy industry. So I will be stepping down from all management positions. And however, I do remain extremely optimistic about the South African dairy industry. And although I step down as a managed team member, I won't step down as a normal member. I will continue to remain a member of the society and to follow everything that is happening. And if we continue with the webinars, then at least I will be able to follow what happened here in South Africa. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. Can you guys hear all right?
Yes, Malcolm, yes. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I've just been asked to thank Mike for his contribution to the society. Mike took over as chairman in 2016, so he's been around for 5 years as our leader of the Western Cape. So Mike, thanks for your different approach, and you've changed the society a lot, and you know what we're doing and what we look out for. It's sad to see you go. I mean, I've told you there is very good bunny chow just down the road here in Hope Street, but you didn't listen to me. You've decided to leave and go to India. The company he's going to, for interest, is a company called Britannia Foods, quite a big group in India. And LinkedIn works. If you guys want to get a post into India, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date and you know, connected. And that's how they got hold of Mike. And I think it's an honor to see that somebody from South Africa, obviously with your experience, you've been 34 years at Parmalat, that they came and said, "No, there's a good guy. Let's, you know, bring him across here." So there's hope for any one of us. And don't ever say you're too old, because I'm a little bit older than Mike. I've had my COVID jab already, but he's not far behind me. And it's a fantastic opportunity. I mean, when I heard about it, you know, I was flabbergasted, and I admire you, Mike, for taking the leap. And I think it's an adventure. He has assured me he is coming back. He's just promised to all of us today that he will be joining in webinars. He's not leaving forever. So it might be 5 years, it might be 8 years, we don't know. So Mike, once again, thanks for your contribution. It's not going to end there. It will still be, you still will be around. There are things like Go Webinar and Teams and things like that, and we will still be in contact with you going forward. But thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you, Malcolm.
Well, thank you to both of you, and thank you for the opportunity of being able to assist you with this webinar. I know we've had a couple of people asking us for details as to where is the recording going to be. Well, all the recordings of our webinars are posted on foodfocus.co.za, so you can look out for this one probably about Tuesday, but I'm sure the South African Society of Dairy would also, Dairy Technology will also be putting it onto their website, so do make sure you visit that to make sure that you are up to date. And if you missed anything important, you can watch it again and you can be re-inspired in order to go out and to make sure that you find purpose in the world of turmoil. Thank you to all of you. Thank you again to SASDT for partnering with us. Why don't you just enjoy the rest of your Thursday? We'll see you soon. Be safe.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.